authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us. From personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
Admonished for. He did that again now, but it's not clear if any of the jurors looked back and acknowledged him. I didn't really see anyone look back to acknowledge him thanking the jury, but he was just thanking the jury, and he would continuously look back at his family. At one point, his son Justin, when the jury left the room, he stood up, he grabbed a book in his hand, he held the hand up like, thank you, lots of prayers from the Combs family. Now, here's the issue. This is, again, of course, not over because his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, is asking that he be released on bail in light of being acquitted of those serious charges. So then again, you see the attorneys going tit for tat. Mark Agnifilo says in light of these charges, he's been acquitted. He deserves to be returned home to his family. He deserves to go back to Two-Star Island in Florida. That's when Maureen Comey stood up and said, listen, Your Honor, these are still serious counts. He was acquitted. However, you heard extensive testimony about the threats. You heard extensive testimony about the violence, and those are still underlying factors. Now, this is when you saw Tini Geragos was livid at this argument, especially in light of the verdict that had just been read. She leaned over to Mark Agnifilo, and she was just like fierce in her face. Like, you know, she was mad, like pointing at Maureen Comey, speaking to Mark Agnifilo, just really upset that it appeared that the prosecution was still going hard to keep Sean Combs detained. Now, when the jury left and we were all dismissed from the court, that was another powerful moment. Sean Combs dropped to his knees. He dropped to his knees where his chair is and just bowed his head and just prayed. It was about 2 or 3 minutes. He just dropped, and you could just tell he was relieved, he was thankful. You know, you just can't really emphasize it enough. Now, typically, this is not what marshals will allow a person to do after conviction. His family stood up in that moment, kind of acknowledging that he was on his knees with his head bowed. And this, now, remind you, it's also an armchair, so it's a pretty robust chair, and he's just on his knees, praying in the chair. When he stood up, the family cheered, lots of cheers. It was kind of like the end of the Super Bowl for this family and for this legal team. They were cheering. Tini Geragos, Mark Agnifilo, group hugs.
His family right now is coming out of the courtroom behind you. We've just seen his mother leading.
Janice Combs walking out the door.
Leading the group out, but we also saw Christian Combs, Justin Combs, as well as his daughters leaving the courtroom.
His 6 children coming out. You know, you have to wonder, this is a very different picture of Sean Combs than we have seen, certainly for the last 2 months, played out in court. Darla, I wanted to ask you, Darla, do you see contrition in Sean Combs today, since you're talking about so much faith and
was it just
Bible,
relief?
And was it relief? Was it what? Do you see a changed man? I mean, I know it's your opinion, but this is certainly a different Sean Combs than was portrayed in court day after day.
First of all, let me tell you, I was actually just in the elevator and in the hallway with the family, the children, as they left. And obviously, we've been in trial together. And as they were walking out of court, you could see them really happy about the verdict as they were waiting for the vehicle. So I was just in there with them before we came out. And the family, obviously, very pleased. You know, Sean Combs has maintained he was innocent the entire time. So I don't believe contrition is the word, but you definitely see humility You see a man of faith. You see his family, the level of family support. There's definitely a tale of two Sean Combs, but I don't think that's new, right? I think at the beginning of the trial, they said this is a man who's dynamic. He inspires people. He's a music mogul. He's touched every life of the people who have worked for him. But there is also a second side of Sean Combs that you don't know, and that was literally in the prosecution's opening arguments. So to say that, you know, I wouldn't speak on contrition. I don't think that's the word. But you see a man who has been praying, and you see a man who feels like his prayers have been answered.
Job of painting every second from when the jury walked in the room to when those charges were read to when they're discussing about maybe possibly releasing Sean Combs from jail today. So there, you were at the point right there where the lawyers were at each other, kind of looking at each other in that argument. Did you feel like one side had a stronger argument standing there?
Again, not a legal analyst, but Judge Arun Subramanian asked Mark Agnifilo, what does that look like? Does he walk out of court today? And he said, in the world, according to Mark Agnifilo, actually, yes. And we would, you know, obviously there's some paperwork that needs to be filed. We need to go through some legal proceedings, but absolutely, yes, this is a day where we think he should walk out of this courtroom. And so then Judge Subramanian asked Combs, I can imagine, Mr. Combs, you don't want to go back to NBC. And he started shaking his head no like that. And he's been known to kind of communicate with the judge like that. There was a little bit of laughter in the courtroom when he was just like, no way, no way, I don't want to go back into the courtroom. I also want to share this with you. I was in the elevator with Mark Agnifilo after the legal wrangling back and forth, because what is now going to happen, both sides have to submit a letter to the court why they believe he deserves to be released on bail today, why they believe he should still be held in custody. Mark Agnifilo is asking for a $1 million bond with 3 family members who are in court today. So they have resolved to get it done today. So court is still not dismissed. We still have to return to the court at 1 o'clock this afternoon to determine or to learn whether or not this bail application will be approved or not, and if he does in fact walk out of the front doors today. But I was in the elevator with Mark Agnifilo. He was asked by one reporter, how do you feel? He says, I've never had this feeling in 34 years. And so then I asked him, well, what does that feeling feel like? And he kind of thought about it, and he says, I'm relieved that I'm not miserable. And so that was one perspective from Mark Agnifilo. The other part of that is Doug Wigdor. He's seated directly in front of me in the courthouse. He's been here every single day of the deliberations. He is the attorney for Cassie Ventura. He's the one who filed that November 2023 bombshell lawsuit that really spurred this investigative, this federal investigation into action. And as they read the verdict, he just sat on his phone with his head down. He didn't flinch. He didn't look. This is obviously not the verdict, not guilty on sex trafficking for his client, Cassie Ventura. Speaking to him privately over the last few days in jury deliberations, he was disappointed, and some of the arguments heard come from the defense during closing arguments. He said, you know, Cassie liked to have sex. That's interesting. A modern-day love story. That's interesting. So I was really disturbed by some of the closing arguments that Mark Agnifilo gave on behalf of Sean Combs, which ultimately ended up being convincing for this jury that acquitted him on the 2 sex trafficking charges, the one for Cassie Ventura and the one for Jane.
Inside, thank you to Darla Miles that she was inside court throughout this 8-week process. If you're just now joining us here on Eyewitness News alongside Sandra Bookman, I'm Mike Marza. In what a bombshell day, finally the conclusion of this Sean Diddy Combs trial that had 28 days of testimony and more than 20 witnesses from the prosecution. And Sean Combs convicted on 2 counts, Sandra, but acquitted on 3.
Yeah, and the 2 counts he was convicted on the lesser charges. Am I correct?
That is
characterizing that the lesser of the 5 charges.
Let's bring in ABC News legal contributor Shauna Lloyd, who has been here throughout this process. Take us through exactly what this means and what this verdict means moving forward for Sean Combs.
So right now, we know that he is not guilty of the 3 largest charges, which carry life sentences. One is the RICO charge, one is trafficking for Cassie Ventura, and trafficking for... He has been acquitted, so they are off the table. Those each carried a life sentence. So now we have the remaining 2 charges. That is the transportation for prostitution related to Cassie Ventura and transportation for prostitution related to Jane. Those carried up to 10 years potential. They are 2 different victims, so the judge has the option of making these terms consecutive, which means they'd be served back to back. Now, we do know that the judge has to balance. When we look at sentencing, they look at other things. Is this defendant, does they have a history of violent convictions? Were there extenuating, aggravating circumstances? Were there minors involved? There are other aggravating factors that I expect that the prosecution is going to argue, because they're already indicated they're looking for the maximum penalty. The defense is going to say he has no major criminal history. He was acquitted on his last charge. He is not a flight risk. He has extensive ties to the community. Therefore, he should be on the lower end of those spectrums.
Will they consider it things like that video that was shown of Cassie Ventura being beaten in a hallway? Are those things likely to be considered when this sentencing goes forward?
I believe that the prosecution is going to put those forth and ask the judge to say, even though he was acquitted, we know that this is who he is. I expect that the defense is going to argue, Judge, this was over 10 years ago. This is not who my defendant is. He expressed remorse. He's gone through counseling. That is in the past. And so I expect that those are the arguments they're going to make as to why it should be towards the lower or towards the higher end of the spectrum.
Here is the video that started it all. It was captured inside of an Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles in 2016, and prosecutors said that is Cassie Ventura being beaten after she escaped or left a sexual encounter dubbed a freak-off. What we're waiting on now is a deadline that is going to come in about 2 hours for both sides, the prosecution and the defense attorneys, to argue whether or not Sean Combs should be released today. The defense attorneys saying that he could be released on $1 million guaranteed bond. We'll see how that plays out. But Shauna, if you're just now joining us, you get the alert on your phone from Eyewitness News and you say, okay, there's a verdict. Take us through what the prosecution was hoping to prove and where they succeeded and where they failed.
So the prosecution was hoping to prove, let's start with RICO, that one, there was a criminal enterprise that was used to further his needs, which they were terming his sexual desires, and that they took and made predicate criminal acts in furtherance of this conspiracy. Those are those arson, kidnapping, bribery, all those charges that we saw. So that's the RICO charge. The trafficking is that related to Jane or to Cassie, that by force, fraud, or coercion, he moved them from state to state in order to partake in commercial sex acts. They did not prove either of those charges, neither the trafficking related to Cassie nor Jane, nor did they prove the RICO. The last charge is a transportation for prostitution. That is basically moving someone through interstate commerce, which is from state to state, in order for them to engage in criminal prostitution. And this was proven. Now, the reason this was proven was because that was the strongest evidence they had. They could show that these were clearly escorts. They were going there for the purposes of commercial sex acts, and that they were paid for these sex acts. They showed bank records, flight records, all of which was paid through Sean Combs.
And even going into this trial, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, me who knows nothing legally, but I thought that RICO charge is hard to prove. So why would the prosecution even go there?
You know, it's always an interesting thing. The prosecution and the federal prosecutors get to make their charging instructions as they see fit. They saw this as a criminal enterprise. When I looked at this from the beginning, as you know, I shared with both of you, I don't see RICO. And the reason I don't see RICO is because the individuals that you're alleging are the enterprise are his bodyguards and his personal assistants and his chief of staff, who is Christina Coram. Your personal assistants are paid to do and bring the things that you ask for. So the idea that they consented to be a part of a criminal conspiracy because they brought baby oil and Astroglide to a hotel, I don't see that. That doesn't meet the legal standard. And I think that's what the jury saw. A bodyguard, they're paid for your protection. So the idea that they were complicit in your crimes because they were standing outside of a room or standing near you, That to me does not hold legally. And I think that's what the jury saw as well.
That's the argument the defense tried to make, too, is that if this is an enterprise, only one person is charged.
Correct. That is another thing.
We are going to throw it back out to Kimberly Richardson, who has been one of the reporters following this trial from the very beginning. This all happened so much faster today, Kimberly, than I thought most people expected.
And Sandra, not only did today happen fast, but just in general, the deliberations started Monday late morning at about 11:30. So we were only, 2 days in with this amount of charges and the seriousness of the charge. It was surprising that they even came back yesterday with that note 6 at the end of the day, saying they had reached a verdict on counts 2 through 5. Let's back up and see how we got here, how we got to this point. This all started in November of 2023 when Cassie Ventura, Combs' ex-girlfriend, filed that civil lawsuit. She was alleging that she was trapped in a cycle of violence. Well, the very next day, November 17th, Combs settled that. We learned during the second day of testimony, Cassie said that it was settled for $20 million. Fast forward to March of 2024. Those were when we had those early morning raids at Combs' estates in Los Angeles and Miami. Coverage was wall to wall. We saw the feds going into these mansions and
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay dipping.